Alright, so real quick before this video begins, I apologize for any background noise you may hear in this video. Currently my apartment is being worked on and a bunch of loud noises can probably be heard, so again, apologies ahead, but let's get into the video. Alright, so 2017 has been a great year. I think we've already been over this many times, and a question that comes with that is definitely, online, what's your game of the year? What is your favorite games that came out this year? So I figured that instead of making kind of like a formal video as I've done in the past, I kind of wrote down a few games that stood out to me this year that I enjoyed the most, and I figured I'd go over them kind of like a commentary and give my thoughts over it instead of just giving it kind of like a paragraph that I would write down or a script. I figured I'd go into these games somewhat more in depth than I usually would and just overall have kind of like a conversation. Now I'm doing something a little bit differently this year than I did in previous years. Usually I'd do like a top 5 or a top 10. But this year, instead of trying to squish games into top 5 and then make it into a 10, even though it doesn't need to be a 10, I just took games that, kind of stood out to me in general. So really what came down to it was about 7 games that stood out to me. So I guess I'm going to go over those. Real quick, I really want to say that this list is ranked. So I know a lot of people kind of like, things just being ranked out in order. So I figured I'd do that in today's video. But again, a lot of these you can kind of switch out for, let's say, number 5 and number 4 and actually make a valid argument. So I wouldn't read too much into these listings, but these are kind of like the rankings of what stood out to me this year. So number 7, I'm going to start out with Uncharted: The Lost Legacy. Now, personally, again, this would probably be higher just because I'm a big Uncharted fan, but also just looking against all these other games, Uncharted: Lost Legacy doesn't really stand out or doesn't really compete at all with these games. Now, Lost Legacy, of course, was a standalone adventure, a lot bigger than we imagined. I still had a lot of flaws with the game, but considering how it came out about just over a year after Uncharted 4, you can just arguably say, it's quite good for a DLC, honestly. Some of my favorite levels in Uncharted history are probably in that game. Definitely some of my favorite puzzles. I definitely liked how they focused kind of a little bit more on action this time around. It's kind of nice to have just a fun, a fun adventure, in the Uncharted world. Uncharted 4 was deeply rooted in the story, and this one doesn't really give you that much of a valid story, at least with Chloe and everything. They did try going for that, and there was maybe 1 or 2 cutscenes that really were pretty cool in terms of the story aspects of it, but really at the end of the day, Uncharted: Lost Legacy was a really fun game filled with a bunch of my favorite encounters yet, as well as puzzles. But in the end, it kind of fell flat. And of course, since it doesn't have Nate, Elena, and Sully, to me, it always won't really rank against the previous games. But it was still a fun adventure to have, and I'm glad they did it. But going forward, I wouldn't really want them to do that again. I kind of liked how it was, meeting Chloe, someone we haven't seen in a while, and Nadine was a really cool matchup. But definitely going forward, I definitely hope they focus on other things. And I think Uncharted, it was a cool DLC, but they don't need to do that going forward. But it was a cool adventure while it lasted. Number 6, this is a really weird one. I put this with Horizon Zero Dawn. Now, Horizon was a game I absolutely loved in the beginning of the year. I went so far as to say it rivaled with Bloodborne and it rivaled with Uncharted 4 in terms of my favorite exclusives. But something happened around February that my, save file pretty much got corrupted, and I'm not sure how, and I had to replay the game and if I wanted to go for the platinum. And doing so, a lot of the flaws kind of opened up to me. I had a lot of flaws with the game in general, things like the human AI combat that you'd go against the, regular AI humans. I thought it was very, very, lacking in terms of the stealth aspect. Another thing when I'm replaying the game, I replayed it kind of after Zelda Breath of the Wild, so that could have ruined it. Zelda, obviously, you can climb over anything, but Horizon has a much more, state of the beaten path and kind of climb up mountains based on the trails they give you. So it's a lot different of a game, but definitely I think Horizon Zero Dawn is definitely still a great game. A lot of people say it's overrated now looking back, but I put this at number 6, but that's just because this game, you could argue that this could be in the top 5, maybe switch it with 5 or 4, but looking back at it, Horizon was a really good game in my opinion. I did feel like I was interested in the story for quite a bit of it. I definitely loved the combat against things like the big Thunderjaws. The game definitely stood out this year for sure, even though it came out in February, which is a good thing. And definitely, I think Horizon Zero Dawn definitely maybe doesn't deserve all the praise it got, but I definitely think it's a game that deserves some of praise because this is Guerrilla Games' first game, to me at least, where it kind of stood out for them. They did the Killzone franchise, but this definitely stood out to me. So yeah, maybe I need to go back and, play Horizon again, but I'd say I put it around number 6. But again, you could probably make an argument that it could be number 5, number 4, but Horizon was definitely a game that had its flaws, but considering it's its first installment in this new franchise that we're probably going to, see more of Aloy, I think we all can assume that that's probably going to be the case. I definitely think they did a pretty good job for a first installment, kind of like Uncharted 1 was, Yeah, I think Horizon Zero Dawn was a great game, but definitely I wouldn't say it was the best of the best this year. Number 5, I put Hellblade. Now, I know this is going to be pretty controversial, kind of like almost like this whole list, I guess, because I put this over Horizon, but I figured Hellblade, 1, deserves more praise than it really has gotten, at least into the casual eyes, and 2, it just did a lot of things different to me that I liked. So Hellblade, one of the biggest things that stands out for me from this whole entire experience is the fact that it has no HUD. No HUD has really been something that you can really only do in games that, you have to tweak with the actual game settings, but the fact that this game makes it so everybody has to play with no HUD really opens the eyes of like how games can be kind of different, and this is kind of like one of the most innovating games, especially coming from Ninja Theory. Definitely was something that I didn't expect. Hellblade was definitely a game that I didn't see coming to this extent. Of course, I did a review on it. Absolutely loved the game. It was like $30. But going more to the game itself, the fact that it has no HUD really relies on audio, which is something you don't really see from games nowadays. Really, it's all about, getting the best visuals. It's all about experimenting with the open world. But really, this was a great linear game that focused with audio a lot more. Of course, voices in your head telling you, oh, there's a guy behind you. So you duck behind, and then there would be certainly an enemy behind you, which is something you wouldn't see based on how the camera's positioned. Definitely a lot of the bosses were fun. A lot of the puzzles, I guess, were very repetitive. A lot of the areas were really repetitive, but coming from like a studio like Ninja Theory, which kind of self-published this game, which almost looks like a AAA game, and I think the game lasted you a good 6 to 8 hours long, depending on how long it took you. Definitely was quite a long journey, and definitely near the end of it, there was like some pretty cool exotic locations that I really liked, and the game just stood out definitely from all the other games this year, considering all, from the voices that are in your head, and just, it's a very, very unique story, and definitely that's going to stand out to me, and I can't wait for Ninja Theory to see what they have next. Of course, not really a sequel to Hellblade, but to see what they could do next, and hopefully self-publish another game. I'm glad the game sold, I believe, financially well, and they got some recognition at the Game Awards. Definitely, if you have not picked up Hellblade, I believe it's on sale quite a bit. I definitely think it's a great linear adventure that you could probably beat within a day or two, depending on how much you can play. But Hellblade, definitely recommend. It's definitely, I keep saying definitely, but it's a great game, honestly, and I'm surprised by how much I enjoyed it. Number 4, I put Wolfenstein: The New Colossus, which is probably the game that I just most recently beat here in December. So Wolfenstein 2 obviously was not a perfect game. It had a lot of ups and downs for me. In fact, I think the game started really strong with the first mission, but then going on in like the first half of the game, I wasn't really feeling it because it felt like, you do a mission, go back to this like hub world, which is the, the submarine your headquarters is located in, and I just felt completely lost. I felt like I was just completely checking every single room, trying to figure out where my mission was. I was kind of lost at some points, but really, the game starts to pick up around the 1/3 part of the game. Like the first third of the game is probably the most slow part, but once you start kicking into high gear, the game just sets off from there, and it has a great story, which is something I didn't expect from a Wolfenstein game, because Wolfenstein games are known for their great action, but the fact that the new Colossus can be seen as a great action game and a great story just hits both marks. The game has so much fun gameplay encounters. The game's basics, in terms of the controls are great, obviously. It builds off the New Order. Not as much as I hope it would. It does, rely on a lot of what the New Order's mechanics, but again, it didn't need to be built upon it, which the New Order was already a great game. But the fact that the story and the characters were so well developed, I guess the story wasn't really that big, but definitely the characters were great this time around. I feel like I know them at least, and know their names, which is something that I wouldn't really say for a lot of first-person campaigns. Wolfenstein, man, a lot of my favorite gaming memories this year have to be from some of the biggest moments in this game. Like, a lot of the game's cutscenes or whatever really stand out, and there's a lot of big moments that just I will remember for years to come, which is something I didn't expect going to the Wolfenstein: The New Colossus. It's also great that this game was actually announced at E3 this year and actually came out within a couple months after, here in October. Definitely a game that launched with Assassin's Creed and Super Mario that might have been shafted away. I don't think the game's doing financially well, but if you're looking for a fun game that also has a great story, which I think that fits into like quite a bit of people. I mean, a lot of people are going to play this for the action, but there's actually a pretty good story there. Definitely think this game deserves to sell well for sure, and I hope we get a third one. Yeah, I really do. I wouldn't say you need to play the New Order before you go into this, but I definitely think it's worth playing the New Order first. But man, it's not a perfect game, don't get me wrong, it's not a perfect game. I think it's kind of overrated by people saying it's game of the year, but definitely I could see arguments for why this could be like number 2 or number 3 for sure. It's definitely really, really fun of a game, and it was a blast to play through it. Number 3, I put Super Mario Odyssey. Now, obviously, I've been a big Mario fan since I was a kid. Galaxy and Galaxy 2 were some of my favorite games on the Wii, which made that whole entire console for me. Super Mario Odyssey, when it was announced, I was just super excited. It almost sold the Switch on me for sure, besides, of course, Zelda. It's just crazy that we got this game with Zelda this year. What can I say? This game is like Super Mario 64, but 10 times it pretty much. There's a lot to do in this game, and while that could be seen as a flaw because there are a lot of moons that are kind of like, it doesn't need to be this many, there's a lot to do in this game, and it feels like a kid again playing honestly through it. The 2D sections are amazing. Man, the game's quite innovating for a Mario game. A lot of people say, oh, it's just another Mario game, but really, Mario games kind of shake it up every single time they do one, you know, this time with the cap, how you can use it as like a second AI, in terms of like throwing the hat and then jumping on it. It opens it up. It gives you a lot of controls and gives you a big playground, and ultimately it's up to you what you want to do with it, whether you want to follow the main path, if you just want to look for every single moon you can find in each world or each hub world. It's really, really cool. I love the aspect that it's kind of like a big journey with the Odyssey. You know, Mario's kind of going on a road trip, or I guess, not really a road trip, I guess, with the Odyssey, but it was definitely a blast. It fun, you know, how you open up the little things, how you open up the map, and it's like a little brochure, just really fitting that Nintendo can only kind of give these kind of experiences that are just really polished and really just filled to the brink with a bunch of fun to do in this game, and I'm still playing it to this day. I think I played it last night on my bed with the Nintendo Switch. It's awesome. Honestly, if you own a Switch, you're definitely picking up Super Mario Odyssey if you have not yet already done so. Definitely a stand up from this year. It's such a blast to play through. Even though I have a lot of flaws with this game, in terms of the amount of moons and amount of openness, and just amount of emptiness a little bit in this game, I think this game it's a Mario game that's super fun to play, and definitely one of my favorite Mario games of all time for sure. Man, number 2, I could arguably say this was my game of the year, because man, did this make my summer. Crash Bandicoot: The Insane Trilogy. I know, it's a remake, it's not necessarily new games, but it's a new game to me because I never played the original 3 Crash games. Now, the reason I put this on my list, I was kind of debating whether, you know, I should put Insane Trilogy on here. I put it for pretty much a couple reasons. One, this game launched in the summer, that pretty much made my summer. You know, no games really come out during the summer, so this really stood out to me when looking back in this year. 2, it's games I've never played before. And 3, it's kind of like a remake, so it's almost like these games were just recreated again, which they practically were. These are practically new games. And man, playing through the first 3 Crash games for the first time, I did play some of the PS2 ones, but going back to the original Naughty Dog ones were really a blast to play. I think, you know, judging by the fact that I got all 3 platinums within a couple weeks of the game coming out, it just showed how much this made my summer. Honestly, when looking back, I think I had the most fun time playing Crash this whole entire year. I'm not gonna lie. Literally, this summer, like, around the July month, I just absolutely played Crash for a lot of my time during the summer, and it was just so much fun to play. Man, what can I say about the game itself, though? I think I talked about it in my review a lot, but the game's just so much fun to play. There's so much in the game to just replay and do the time trials. The main mechanics, obviously, it's like a platformer, 3D platformer. Yeah, the mechanics are pretty good for the most part, despite some people having, you know, claims that, oh, you know, the jump button is a little bit slow. Well, that is true. You know, I'm looking at you, frickin' that road with that map, the freaking level with the bridge was definitely a pain in the ass. Man, I just have so many memories playing this game this year. Definitely a fun time that I'm not going to forget soon. Definitely, it launched with $40. Like, you cannot go wrong with 3 great games for $40, and it's practically cheaper now. The game's just a blast to play through. I played it for, like, the whole month of July. Man, that just made my summer. Crash Bandicoot: The Insane Trilogy is definitely a game that I'm going to remember and keep playing for years to come, and judging by the fact that I have all 3 platinums in the game, I barely do really go out for platinums, so that says a lot. Man, I just love platformers, and Crash Bandicoot: The Insane Trilogy arguably was better than Mario Odyssey for me this year, because it was 3 great games, 3 great linear, you know, well-crafted 3D platformer levels, and man, it is awesome. I can't stop talking about this game. I could arguably say this was my game of the year, possibly. It was just that much fun to play through all those levels and all 3 games, so yeah. Go watch my review if you have not yet already, and if you haven't bought Crash Bandicoot, I don't know why you haven't already, go buy it. It's really cheap, and it gives you a lot of great fun out of all those 3 games, so yeah. Alright, so game of the year, the moment everybody's been waiting for, and I'm pretty sure you can all pretty much guess what it is. Zelda Breath of the Wild. Now, a lot of people are saying Zelda Breath of the Wild is overrated, and a lot of people say that this game deserves like 10 out of 10, 10 out of 10. I kind of fall somewhere in the medium of that. I think the game is a great, like maybe a 9 or so. I wouldn't say it's a masterpiece, but I definitely say it's really close there, and it does a lot of different things than any Zelda game that I've seen, so I never really played any of the Zelda games as a kid, but, you know, they're always very linear, and you had to go to certain dungeons, but never really did Zelda be, like, a big open world where you could just explore. And in this one, the main thing that I really liked is the fact you can climb anything. Now, obviously, me being a big Uncharted fan, one of the best parts about Uncharted to me is, like, climbing. I love, you know, pretty much climbing the environment. It's pretty cool. It's one of my favorite aspects out of Uncharted. At least that had me intrigued from as like a little kid. So obviously the fact that you can climb anything in Zelda Breath of the Wild and really go at your own pace, which is something, you know, I always like kind of like linear games more, but Zelda Breath of the Wild is definitely a fresh take on the open world genre. Even though it did have those kind of Ubisoft towers, really the way you tackle this whole entire world and just go about what you want to do is just a great new, you know, unique on the Zelda franchise for sure. Man, I just want to It's just Switch, honestly. I love Zelda. I want to play Zelda. This is better than Super Mario Odyssey. Yeah, here's some examples of like games here. Things like Wolfenstein puzzles. Nice. I'm trying to go Zelda, honestly. The game Zelda was definitely the reason I bought a Switch, hands down. Definitely the game that still stands out to me in terms of like its whole lineup. Like, I had a unique journey. It's really hard to talk about Zelda in general because I had a unique journey compared to everybody else, obviously, because everybody goes out at what, you know, the pace they want to go, where they want to go. So that's one of the best parts about Zelda Breath of the Wild. You kind of create your own story. It's not like a really linear thing. You go the way you want to go. You can go north, east, south, west, and yeah, really it could take you anywhere, which is really, really cool. But in terms of the main mechanics as a whole, you know, things like eating peppers in order to stay warm in the Snowy Mountains and until you find actually, like, you know, proper clothing items to wear into the, you know, Snowy Mountains. It's just, I can go on about this game for, you know, just hours, honestly. This game is so much fun to play. I still repeat it, going in, finding shrines. I think I've only found like 70 out of 120 shrines. I don't know where those other 50 shrines could possibly be on the map. The game is just filled with a bunch of stuff to do, and things like, oh my god, I didn't even mention the paraglider yet. It's just a lot different of a game I've ever played, and I know I sound like a fanboy just talking about the game, but the game is just something that I've been wanting to play for a while now, ever since I saw it about E3 a couple years back. Zelda Breath of the Wild was one of the main reasons I bought a Switch, and the game is not perfect. I know it sounds like I'm talking about a lot of the great things, you know, things like the weapon breaking, things like the fact that the game has a very open world. The game was not perfect by any stretch of the imagination at all, but what it does right is really good in my opinion, and just stood out to me as a whole this year. Honestly, if I think of 2017, I'm going to think of mainly 3 games. Zelda Breath of the Wild, Crash Bandicoot, and Super Mario Odyssey. Those are like the 3 games that stood out to me this year for sure. So yeah, those are the 7 games that kind of stood out to me this year. I kind of want to do a little bit, you know, of a different strategy, just talking about the games as a whole, and I think it came out better in terms of giving my thoughts or getting my personal opinions out there, so yeah, going into 2018, it definitely looks like a strong year, which is always exciting. What else can I say? Those are like the 7 games, if you're looking at 2017 as a whole, that I recommend personally. But again, these are just my personal thoughts, so of course, I welcome you to list your own in the comments down below, of course. And I want to hear what your guys' favorite games of the year. Yeah, I've been online, of course. 2017, I'm glad I got this video out. I really want to mention for people that might be confused, I did not play Nier yet. I have not played Resident Evil 7. Nor Neo, and I did not beat Cuphead or Persona 5 yet. So, Cuphead and Persona 5, I have played them. They're really great games. I'd argue that Cuphead might make this list if I have finished it yet. Cuphead and Persona 5 are definitely games that I'm playing through right now, but I've not finished. So, yeah, that's always kind of like the struggle making these videos. Do you wait till you played every single game this year? I don't think that's even possible, so yeah, I'm just gonna make this list while I can, and those are the great games that stood out to me this year, so yeah. Make sure to leave your comments down below, of course, as always. Make sure to subscribe if you are new here. I have been online, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out.